Elena Vasquez stepped off her transport ship and looked up at the massive council building. It reached high into the sky like a giant crystal tower. She had been here many times before, but today felt different. The message from the Galactic Council had been short and cold. They wanted to see her immediately. As Earth's main ambassador, Elena had worked hard to keep peace between humans and the other alien races. For 20 years, humans had been part of the Galactic Council. They were new members compared to the other 12 races who had ruled space for thousands of years. The elevator took her up through the crystal tower. Through the clear walls, she could see the capital world of Centauri Prime below. Beautiful cities stretched as far as she could see. Everything was clean and perfect, just like the aliens who lived there. Elena walked into the main council chamber. The room was huge, with 12 tall seats arranged in a circle. Each seat was made for a different alien race. The Centauri Chancellor sat in the biggest chair at the center. His blue skin glowed softly in the light. Around him sat the other council members. They all looked serious. "Ambassador Vasquez," the Chancellor said. His voice was smooth but cold. "Please take your place." Elena walked to the small human seat. It was much lower than the others, showing that humans were the youngest and least important members. She had always hated that, but she kept quiet. Her job was to keep peace. "We have called you here today to discuss humanity's future in our great alliance," the Chancellor began. The other council members nodded, their eyes all focused on Elena. "Of course, Chancellor. How can humanity help the Council?" Elena asked, politely. The Chancellor smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "The galaxy faces new challenges. The Council has decided that all member races must contribute more to our common defense and prosperity." Elena felt her stomach tighten. She had heard these words before, but not directed at humans. Other younger races had received similar messages over the years. Most of them had agreed. Those who refused had faced serious problems. "What kind of contributions does the Council need?" Elena asked carefully. A tall, thin alien called a Vorthak spoke next. "Humanity currently provides only raw materials and basic labor to our economy. This is no longer enough." The Chancellor nodded. "Starting next month, humanity will provide 60% of all industrial output to the Council. This includes all factories, mines, and construction projects." Elena's eyes widened. 60% was almost everything humans produced. "That seems like a very large amount, Chancellor. Our people need those resources too." "Furthermore," the Vorthak continued, ignoring Elena's concern, "humanity will provide soldiers for the Galactic Defense Force. Every human world will send 20% of its young adults for military service." "Military service?" Elena repeated. Humans had their own small defense forces, but they had never been asked to fight in galactic wars. The Chancellor leaned forward. "And finally, the Council will establish oversight stations in all major human systems. These stations will ensure that humanity follows all Council laws and regulations properly." Elena felt cold. Oversight stations meant Council troops on human worlds. It meant aliens watching everything humans did. It meant the end of human independence. "These are significant changes," Elena said slowly. "I will need to discuss them with Earth's government." The Chancellor's smile disappeared. "There is nothing to discuss, Ambassador. These are not requests. They are requirements for continued membership in the galactic community. But surely the human government should have a chance to—" "The Council has made its decision," interrupted a spider-like alien called a Nexari. "Lesser species must understand their place in the galactic order." Elena felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "May I have 48 hours to inform my government of these new requirements?" The Council members looked at each other. Some made clicking sounds. Others flashed different colors with their skin. Finally, the Chancellor spoke. 48 hours is unnecessary. Young races often worry too much about change. Your people will adapt as all intelligent species do. "But what if Earth's government has questions or concerns?" Elena pressed. The Chancellor's eyes grew darker. "Ambassador, let me be very clear. The galaxy can be a dangerous place for worlds that stand alone. Pirates attack unprotected systems. Trade routes close without warning. Accidents happen to ships that travel without proper escort. Elena understood the threat perfectly. Every race that had refused the Council's demands had faced exactly these problems. Their ships were attacked by mysterious pirates. Their trade was cut off. Their colonies were raided by unknown forces that never seemed to bother Council worlds. "Of course," Elena said quietly. "I understand the Council's position." "Excellent," the Chancellor said, his cold smile returning. "We knew humanity would be reasonable. Your people have always been practical." A floating, gas-like alien called. A ethereal spoke in a voice like wind through caves. "The transition will begin in one standard month. Council representatives will arrive at Earth to begin the process." "And the oversight stations?" Elena asked. "Will be established immediately," the Vorthak replied. "We cannot allow any delays in implementing these important security measures." Elena nodded, knowing she had no choice. "I will inform Earth of the Council's decisions." "Decisions they will accept," the Chancellor said firmly. It was not a question. Elena stood up from her low chair. Around her, the 12 Council members watched with satisfaction. They had done this many times before with many other races. It always worked the same way. Younger species complained at first, but they always gave in. The alternative was too frightening. "Is there anything else the Council requires?" Elena asked. "Only that humanity remembers its place," the Nexari clicked. "Great civilizations like ours have maintained order in this galaxy for millennia. Young races benefit greatly from our guidance and protection." Elena bowed her head respectfully. "Of course. Thank you for including humanity in your great alliance." As she walked toward the exit, Elena heard the Council members talking among themselves in their various languages. Some were laughing. They thought this was easy. They thought humans would simply accept whatever the Council demanded, just like all the other races had done. Elena stepped back into the elevator and began the long ride down. Through the crystal walls, she could see Zentari Prime's perfect cities again. Everything was so organized, so controlled. The Council had built a galaxy where they made all the decisions and everyone else followed orders. But as the elevator descended, Elena was not thinking about the Council's power or their threats. She was thinking about a conversation she had with President Chen 6 months ago. He had asked her a simple question: "What do you think the Council will demand when they finally show their true face?" Elena had known this day would come. Every human diplomat had known. The only question was when. She reached the bottom of the tower and walked back toward her transport ship. The Council thought they had won another easy victory. They thought humans would bow down and accept whatever scraps they were given. Elena smiled for the first time since entering the Council chambers. The Chancellor was right about one thing: humans were practical people. But he had made one very big mistake. He assumed that being practical meant being weak. Soon the Council would learn the difference. Elena's message reached Earth 8 hours later. She had sent it through secure channels, knowing the Council might be watching normal communications. As she waited for a response, she expected panic. She expected angry calls from government, leaders demanding to know how this had happened. Instead, her personal communicator chimed with a simple message: "Please return to Earth immediately for emergency consultation." The trip back to Earth took 3 days. Elena spent the time thinking about what the human government might do. Fight the Council? That would be suicide. Humanity had good ships and brave soldiers, but they were just one young race against 12 ancient civilizations. Submit to the demands? That would mean the end of human independence. Other races who had accepted similar terms were now little more than slaves, producing wealth for the Council while their own people lived in poverty. When Elena's ship entered Earth's solar system, she was surprised to see how normal everything looked. Ships moved along their usual trade routes. Space stations operated normally. There were no signs of panic or military mobilization. At Earth's orbital headquarters, Elena was met by Director Sarah Kim from the Intelligence Service. Sarah was a small, quiet woman who rarely spoke in public meetings. Most aliens barely noticed her when she attended diplomatic functions. "How bad is it?" Elena asked as they walked through the station corridors. Sarah smiled. That depends on your perspective. Follow me. They took an elevator deep into the station's core, far below the public areas. Elena had never been to these levels before. The corridors here looked different, more functional, less decorative. Security doors required special codes to open. Sarah led her into a large room filled with screens and computers. Dozens of people worked at various stations, monitoring data streams that Elena didn't recognize. At the center of the room sat President Chen and the Colonial Assembly leadership. Elena, President Chen stood up and shook her hand warmly. Thank you for your excellent work with the Council. Your report was very helpful. Elena stared at him in confusion. Helpful? Sir, they're demanding 60% of our industrial output and military conscription. They want to put oversight stations on every human world. Yes, exactly what we expected, said Colonial Director Martinez. Almost exactly what our models predicted. I don't understand, Elena said. President Chen gestured to the screens around them. Elena, what do you think we've been doing for the past 20 years? Elena looked around the room. The screen showed star maps with hundreds of systems marked in different colors. Some maps showed ship movements. Others displayed resource flows and population data. We've been preparing, Sarah said quietly. From the moment we joined the Council, our best minds have been studying their history. Every single species that joined the Council eventually faced the same ultimatum you just received. President Chen nodded. Those who accepted became subordinate races, working for the Council's benefit. Those who refused faced mysterious pirate attacks, trade blockades, and system failures until they either submitted or were destroyed. But there was always a third option, Martinez added, one that no previous species had ever tried. Elena felt her heart racing. What option? Walking away, Sarah said simply. President Chen gestured to one of the large screens. It showed a map of human-controlled space, but Elena noticed something strange. There were far more systems marked as human settlements than she remembered. For 20 years, while we've been sending raw materials to the Council and playing the role of grateful junior members, we've also been secretly expanding, Chen explained. Mining ships that reported finding empty asteroids actually discovered rich systems beyond Council space. Trade vessels that claimed to be carrying simple goods were really setting up hidden colonies. Elena stared at the map. How many? 237 hidden systems, Martinez said proudly, complete with mining operations, manufacturing facilities, and agricultural worlds, all of them designed to be completely self-sufficient. That's impossible, Elena breathed. The Council monitors all human ships. Sarah laughed. They monitor the ships they know about. But cargo haulers can carry more than cargo. Mining vessels can build more than they mine. And passenger ships can carry people to places other than their filed destinations. Elena looked around the room again. Now she understood what she was seeing. These weren't just monitoring stations. They were command centers for a massive covert operation. We've been planning this evacuation for 15 years, President Chen said. Every human facility in Council space was designed to be portable. Every important resource has backup sources in our hidden systems. Every critical person has an evacuation route already planned. But the Council will never let us leave, Elena protested. They'll send their fleets to stop us. With what justification? Sarah asked. We're not rebelling or fighting. We're simply choosing to leave their alliance. According to galactic law, any species can withdraw from voluntary associations. Martinez pulled up another screen. Besides, they'll be too busy dealing with their own problems to chase us. The screen showed economic data. Elena studied the numbers and felt her jaw drop. We're supporting 40% of their economy? Human labor built most of their recent infrastructure, President Chen explained. Human minds provide the rare materials their technology depends on. Human factories produce 60% of the manufactured goods sold in Council space. When we leave, their entire economic system will collapse within months. Elena sat down heavily in a nearby chair. You've been planning this since before I became ambassador. We needed someone honest in the role, Sarah said gently. Someone who would genuinely try to maintain good relations with the Council. If you had known about our preparations, you might have acted differently. The Council needed to believe that humans were exactly what we appeared to be. Grateful, subordinate, and dependent. And now? Elena asked. President Chen smiled. Now, we give them exactly what they asked for. A clear answer to their ultimatum. He handed Elena a simple message pad. The text was short and polite. The human colonial government respectfully declines the Galactic Council's generous offer of enhanced membership requirements. Effective immediately, humanity hereby withdraws from galactic community membership. We thank the Council for 20 years of peaceful cooperation and wish all member species prosperity in their future endeavors. Elena read the message twice. That's it? That's it, Chen confirmed. No threats, no demands, no dramatic speeches. We're simply choosing to leave. What about retaliation? Elena asked. Sarah activated another screen. This one showed fleet positions throughout Council space. Every human ship is already moving toward extraction points. Every facility is beginning shutdown procedures. Every family on alien worlds has evacuation orders. Within 72 hours, there won't be a single human left in Council territory. Elena stared at the scope of the operation. Thousands of ships, millions of people, entire industrial complexes, all moving according to a plan that had been in development for decades. And after we're gone? She asked. Martinez smiled. Then we build something better. A real alliance based on voluntary cooperation instead of forced tribute. We've already been in contact with dozens of other species who are tired of Council control. President Chen stood up. Elena, we need you to deliver that message to the Council. Can you do that? Elena looked at the message pad again. Such simple words to end humanity's relationship with galactic civilization. But as she thought about the Chancellor's cold smile and his threats, she felt her doubts disappear. Yes, she said firmly. I can do that. Good, Chen said, because in 3 days the real work begins. We're going to show the galaxy what humans can build when we're free to build it ourselves. Elena stood up, the message pad in her hand. For the first time since leaving the Council chambers, she felt hope instead of fear. The Council thought they had cornered humanity, but they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed humans would react like every other species, with either submission or desperate resistance. They never considered that humans might have been quietly preparing for this moment for 20 years. Soon, they would learn what human preparation really meant. Elena returned to Zentari Prime exactly 72 hours after her first meeting. This time, she walked into the Council chambers with a calm confidence that surprised even herself. The 12 Council members sat in their tall chairs looking, pleased with themselves. They expected humanity's surrender. Ambassador Vasquez, the Chancellor said with his cold smile, I trust you bring good news from your government. Elena stepped forward and placed the message pad on the central table. I bring Earth's official response to the Council's generous offer. The Chancellor picked up the pad and read silently. His blue skin slowly shifted from bright blue to a darker shade. The other Council members leaned forward, trying to read his expression. This appears to be some sort of mistake, the Chancellor said slowly. Surely humanity does not mean to withdraw from our great alliance. There is no mistake, Chancellor, Elena replied politely. The message is clear and official. The spider-like Nexari clicked angrily. This is impossible. No species leaves the Council voluntarily. According to galactic law, any member can withdraw from voluntary associations, Elena said, quoting the Council's own legal code. Humanity exercises this right effective immediately. The Vorthak stood up from his chair. You cannot survive without Council protection and trade. The galaxy is full of dangers for isolated worlds. Elena smiled. Humanity appreciates the Council's concern, but we are confident in our ability to manage our own affairs. As Elena spoke, something unprecedented was happening throughout Council space. Every human facility, from the smallest mining station to the largest industrial complex, had received the same coded signal. Exodus protocol, active. On the mining station Kepler-7, Supervisor James Wong looked at his data pad and nodded to his crew. They had practiced this drill dozens of times, but never thought they would use it for real. Within minutes, mining equipment that seemed permanently bolted to the asteroid began folding into compact units. Support structures that looked like permanent installations collapsed into portable modules. The alien miners working alongside the humans watched in confusion as the entire operation transformed. Equipment they thought was fixed in place turned out to be cleverly designed to pack up quickly. The humans worked with practiced efficiency, loading everything into cargo ships that suddenly seemed much larger than before. Similar scenes played out across hundreds of locations. On the trade station New Geneva, human merchants began closing their shops and loading their goods. Their alien customers protested, but the humans politely explained that they were ending their business operations in Council space. The cargo, ship Aurora, which had been hauling simple manufactured goods between systems for 15 years, revealed its true nature. Hidden compartments opened to show additional storage space. The engine section expanded as concealed power cores came online. What had appeared to be a modest freight hauler was actually a colony transport, capable of carrying thousands of people. Ondai, the beautiful world of Celestia, where humans worked in alien cities as engineers and technicians, the evacuation was more delicate. Families packed only personal belongings, leaving behind homes and businesses they had built over decades. But even here, the humans moved with calm purpose, following plans they had memorized years earlier. Back in the council chambers, the Chancellor was receiving reports from across his territory. His advisors whispered urgently in his ear, their voices growing more worried with each update. "Your people seem to be leaving," the Chancellor said to Elena, his voice strained. "Yes," Elena replied simply, "as announced in our message. But this is clearly a temporary protest," the floating ethereal said, its gaseous form swirling nervously. "Surely humanity will reconsider when they realize the consequences." Elena remained polite but firm. "The decision is final, Counselor. Humanity wishes all Council members prosperity and peace." The Chancellor's skin darkened further. "You cannot simply pack up decades of infrastructure overnight. This is some sort of deception." But Elena knew it wasn't deception. It was careful planning. Every human facility in Council space had been designed with portability in mind. What looked like permanent structures were actually modular systems that could be disassembled and transported. Mining equipment that seemed bolted to asteroids was held in place by magnetic clamps that could release instantly. The evacuation fleet was already moving. Cargo ships that had spent years learning every safe route through Council space now used that knowledge to avoid patrols and checkpoints. Transport vessels collected people from distant worlds, following paths that would take them far from main trade routes. But the most surprising development was happening on the evacuation routes themselves. As human ships streamed toward the galactic rim, they were not traveling alone. The Kythera pack hunters, wolf-like beings who had always respected human military tactics, began following the human fleet. Their warrior culture had found kindred spirits among human soldiers, and they had grown tired of council bureaucrats who understood nothing of honor or courage. The crystalline resonance, whose music had blended beautifully with human compositions, loaded their entire civilization onto massive crystal ships and joined the exodus. They had discovered that humans were the only species who truly appreciated their art. Even some individual aliens from council species began abandoning their positions to follow the humans. Engineers who had worked alongside humans for years, traders who had found humans more honest than their own kind, artists and scientists who had discovered new possibilities in human creativity. The Chancellor watched the reports with growing alarm. Not only were the humans leaving, but they were taking valuable allies with them, some of the galaxy's most skilled warriors, most talented artists, and most innovative thinkers were abandoning council space. "This cannot be allowed," the Nexari clicked furiously. "Send fleets to intercept them." "On what grounds?" Elena asked, calmly. "They are not attacking anyone or stealing anything. They are simply choosing to leave." The Vorthak's eyes flashed with anger. They are stealing Council property. Those facilities, those ships, that equipment. Elena smiled. All legally purchased with human resources built by human labor and registered to human corporations. The documentation is all in order, I assure you. The Chancellor stood up from his chair, his massive form towering over Elena. You think you are clever, Ambassador, but you are making a terrible mistake. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Without Council protection, your people will not survive a year. That may be true, Chancellor, Elena replied evenly, but it will be humanity's choice to make. As Elena spoke, the last human facilities were shutting down. The great industrial complex on Titan Station, which produced advanced electronics for half the galaxy, went dark as its human operators loaded the final piece of equipment onto transport ships. The mining operation in the Vega system, which had supplied rare crystals to Council manufacturers for 20 years, left behind only empty tunnels and abandoned alien overseers. But perhaps most shocking of all, the humans left everything clean and undamaged. They didn't sabotage facilities or destroy equipment they couldn't take. They simply packed up their own property and left, following every legal requirement and contract obligation. Within 72 hours, over 12 million humans had vanished from Council space, taking with them nearly 40% of the galaxy's industrial capacity. They left behind polite thank you notes and forwarding addresses for final paperwork. The evacuation fleet stretched across dozens of star systems, but it moved with precision and purpose. These weren't refugees fleeing in panic. They were colonists heading toward a new future they had been preparing for decades. Elena looked at the stunned faces of the Council members and felt a moment of genuine sympathy. For thousands of years, they had used the same pattern: make demands, threaten consequences, and watch younger species submit. No one had ever simply walked away before. The Council chamber will be available for human use whenever we choose to return, Elena said politely. We appreciate your hospitality during our membership. As she turned to leave, the Chancellor called after her. Where are you going? What are your people planning? Elena paused at the chamber door and looked back. We're going to build something new, Chancellor. Something based on choice rather than force. We hope it works out well for everyone. She walked out of the Council chambers for the last time, leaving behind 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, sitting in stunned silence. They had just witnessed something impossible, an entire civilization choosing freedom over security, uncertainty over submission. Soon they would understand the true cost of that choice. 6 months after the human exodus, Chancellor Vexithani stood on his private balcony overlooking the capital city of Zentari Prime. The view that had once filled him with pride now showed only problems. Half the city's districts were running on emergency power. Construction projects sat unfinished. The beautiful parks and gardens were starting to look neglected. The humans had been gone for only 6 months, but their absence was felt everywhere. The Chancellor had spent those months learning just how much the galaxy had depended on human labor and innovation. Inside his office, economic advisors presented their daily reports with increasingly worried expressions. Production in the Vega mining sector had dropped by 70% without human operators. The massive industrial stations that had hummed with activity now struggled to maintain basic operations. Alien workers, accustomed to human supervisors who could solve any problem, found themselves helpless when complex systems broke down. The power grid on Celestia is failing again, reported Minister Kolvar, his normally confident voice strained. Without human engineers, we cannot maintain the fusion reactors properly. Chancellor Vexithani turned from the window. His blue skin had lost its healthy glow and appeared dull gray. What about the backup systems? The backup systems were designed by humans 20 years ago. Our current engineers do not understand them well enough to repair them when they fail. The Chancellor sat down heavily in his chair. Similar reports came in every day. The humans hadn't just provided labor. They had quietly become the backbone of Council civilization. Their innovative solutions to problems, their ability to make old systems work better, their talent for finding efficient ways to do difficult tasks, all of it was gone. What news from the outer systems? The Chancellor asked. Minister Kolvar hesitated. More bad news, I'm afraid. The Altair colony has requested permission to leave Council space. They cite economic hardship and inability to maintain their infrastructure without human support. This was the worst part. The human exodus had triggered a cascade of problems throughout Council territory. Systems that had relied on human-built infrastructure found themselves unable to maintain it. Colonies that had depended on human trade routes saw their economies collapse. Worlds that had grown accustomed to human problem-solving discovered that other Council races were not nearly as helpful. The Chancellor activated his personal communicator. Get me Admiral Zexkar. I want to know the status of our search for the human fleet. Admiral Zexkar's image appeared on the screen. The military commander looked as frustrated as the Chancellor felt. No success, Chancellor. Our scout ships have searched every system along their suspected route. It's as if they simply vanished into empty space. That's impossible. 12 million people and thousands of ships cannot just disappear. With respect, Chancellor, it seems they can. Our intelligence suggests they had been preparing secret routes and hidden bases for years. They knew exactly where they were going, and they chose paths that avoid all our patrol routes. The Chancellor closed his eyes. The humans had outmaneuvered them completely. While the Council had been focused on controlling the systems they considered valuable, the humans had been quietly expanding into regions the Council had dismissed as worthless. A new voice interrupted his thoughts. Chancellor, you have an urgent message from the Nixari homeworld. The spider-like Nixari counselor appeared on screen, her multiple eyes flashing with barely controlled anger. Chancellor, this situation has become critical. 3 more systems in our sector have declared independence. They claim they cannot survive economically without human trade and support. We cannot allow the dissolution of Council authority, the Chancellor replied. But his words sounded hollow even to himself. Then what do you propose we do? Send fleets to attack worlds that want to leave? Force them to stay in an alliance that no longer serves their needs? The Chancellor had no answer. The Council had always maintained control through a combination of economic incentives and implied threats. But the threats only worked if the alternatives were worse than submission. The human exodus had shown that there might be better alternatives. Over the following weeks, more disturbing reports arrived. The Resonants, who had joined the human exodus, were apparently thriving. Long-range sensors detected massive crystal formations in previously empty space, the signs of resonant cities being built on a scale never seen before. Even more worrying were the intercepted communications, suggesting that the humans were not just surviving, but expanding. Trade signals indicated new colonies being established at an incredible rate. Industrial signatures suggested manufacturing capabilities that exceeded what they had possessed in Council space. The Chancellor called an emergency Council session. When the 12 members gathered in the Great Chamber, the mood was grim. The floating ethereal spoke first, its gaseous form swirling with agitation. Our economic projections are catastrophic. Without human industrial output, our trade networks are collapsing. Without human innovation, our technology is stagnating. Without human labor, our major projects are grinding to a halt. The Vorthak representative's tall form seemed to droop with exhaustion. My people are asking questions I cannot answer. They want to know why we drove away the most productive and innovative species in the galaxy over demands that now seem trivial. They were junior members. The Nixari clicked angrily. They should have been grateful for Council guidance. Grateful enough to give us 60% of their production? The ethereal asked. Grateful enough to send their children to fight our wars? Grateful enough to accept military occupation of their worlds? The Chancellor listened to the debate with growing dread. He was beginning to understand that the Council had made a fundamental error in judgment. They had treated humanity like all the other junior species they had bullied into submission. But humans had been different in ways they hadn't recognized. There's more, Minister Kolvar said quietly. Our intelligence services report that several other species have established contact with the human Commonwealth. Commonwealth? The Chancellor asked. That's what they're calling themselves now. The Free Human Commonwealth and Allied Species. They appear to be offering membership to any race that wants to join a voluntary alliance. The Nexari's eyes flashed. Voluntary? They're trying to build a rival power structure. No, the ethereal corrected sadly. They're building the kind of alliance we should have built. One based on mutual benefit rather than forced tribute. The Chancellor stood up slowly. Around him, representatives of 12 proud and ancient civilizations looked like confused children. They had been so certain of their superiority, so confident in their right to rule, that they had never considered the possibility that someone might simply choose to leave. "What are our options?" the Chancellor asked. "We could try to negotiate with them," suggested the Vorthak. "Offer better terms, perhaps partial autonomy in exchange for resumed trade. We could attempt to locate and attack their hidden bases." The Nexari clicked aggressively. "With what justification?" the ethereal asked. "They haven't attacked us or threatened us, they simply left. Any military action against them would brand us as aggressors in the eyes of the galaxy." The Chancellor walked to the great windows overlooking Zentari Prime. In the distance, he could see construction equipment sitting idle on half-finished buildings. The humans who had operated those machines were gone, and no one else could make them work properly. "Sir," Minister Kolvar said carefully, "there's one more option." "What is it?" "We could ask to join their commonwealth." The silence in the chamber was absolute. The idea that the Great Galactic Council might ask to join an alliance created by former junior members was so shocking that no one could speak. But as the Chancellor looked out at his failing city, he began to wonder if pride was worth the price they were paying. The humans had offered them something the Council had never provided to anyone: true partnership instead of domination. "Find them," the Chancellor said quietly. "Open communication channels. Tell them." He paused. The words, difficult to say. "Tell them the Galactic Council requests discussions about possible trade agreements." It was the first time in 1,000 years that the Council had asked for anything instead of demanded it. As his message went out into the void, Chancellor Vexathani wondered if it was already too late to repair the damage they had done. In the depths of space, the message traveled toward coordinates the Council could only guess at, seeking the humans who had walked away from the galaxy's greatest power and somehow become a power themselves. The reckoning had begun, and the Council was no longer in control of the outcome. 2 years after the Exodus, Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of New Terra Station and marveled at the view. The massive space station orbited a beautiful blue-green world that had been empty when the human fleet first arrived. Now, it bustled with activity from dozens of different species, all working together by choice rather than force. Elena wore a different uniform now, the simple but elegant design of the Commonwealth Diplomatic Corps. She was no longer humanity's ambassador to an alien power. She was the Commonwealth's representative, speaking for humans and 47 other species who had chosen to join their voluntary alliance. "Ambassador Vasquez," called a familiar voice. Elena turned to see Sarah Kim approaching, now Director of Commonwealth Intelligence. "Your visitors have arrived." Elena nodded and walked toward the station's main docking bay. Today would mark a historic moment, the first official diplomatic meeting between the Commonwealth and the Galactic Council since the Exodus. The Council's ship was impressive, a gleaming vessel that spoke of ancient power and technological mastery. But Elena noticed signs of neglect in its design, scratches that hadn't been repaired, systems that seemed to be running on backup power. The mighty Council was clearly struggling. Chancellor Vexathani emerged from the ship, and Elena was shocked by his appearance. The proud leader, she remembered, had become a tired, gray figure who moved slowly and kept his eyes downcast. With him came 5 other council members, a much smaller delegation than she had expected. "Chancellor," Elena said politely, greeting him with the same respect she had always shown. "Welcome to New Terra Station. The Commonwealth is honored by your visit." The Chancellor looked around the docking bay with obvious surprise. He had expected to find humans hiding in some remote outpost, struggling to survive without Council support. Instead, He saw a thriving hub of activity with technology that looked more advanced than anything in Council space. Ambassador Vasquez, the Chancellor said formally. The Council appreciates your willingness to meet with us. Elena led the delegation through the station. As they walked, the Chancellor and his companions stared openly at what they saw. Humans worked alongside crystalline resonance whose music filled the air with beautiful harmonies. Cathara pack hunters shared meals with gentle herbivore species that would never have met in Council space. Engineers from a dozen different races collaborated on projects that seemed impossible. How many species are part of your Commonwealth? Asked the Vorthak representative, his tall form seeming somehow diminished. 47 full members and 12 observer species considering membership, Elena replied. We expect to reach 60 members within the year. The Council members exchanged glances. In 2 years, the Commonwealth had gained nearly 5 times as many members as the Council had accumulated in 1,000 years. Elena led them into a large conference room with a circular table. Unlike the Council chambers with their hierarchical seating arrangement, every chair around this table was identical in size and placement. Please sit wherever you're comfortable, Elena said. President Chen entered the room along with representatives from several other Commonwealth species. The Chancellor recognized some faces, minor diplomats from races the Council had barely acknowledged. Now they sat as equals in this new alliance. Chancellor Vexithani, President Chen said warmly. Thank you for coming. How can the Commonwealth help the Council? The direct question seemed to surprise the Chancellor. He had expected formal protocols and power games. Instead, he found himself facing genuine interest in helping solve problems. The Council faces certain challenges, the Chancellor began, carefully. Our infrastructure requires maintenance that we currently cannot provide. Our trade networks have become inefficient. Our member systems are experiencing economic difficulties. Elena nodded sympathetically. We understand. The Exodus created disruptions for everyone. That was never our intention. Your people were skilled workers, the Vorthak said quietly. More skilled than we realized. When they left, many systems simply stopped functioning properly. It wasn't just the skills, added the Nixari representative. It was their attitude toward problem solving. They found ways to make things work better rather than just maintaining them as they were. Elena smiled. That's very kind of you to say. What kind of assistance is the Council seeking? The Chancellor straightened in his chair, trying to regain some of his old authority. The Council would be interested in establishing formal trade relations with the Commonwealth. Perhaps some technical assistance agreements. Of course, President Chen said immediately. The Commonwealth believes in free trade and mutual assistance among all civilizations. The ease of the acceptance surprised the Council delegation. They had expected demands, conditions, perhaps revenge for past treatment. There would need to be negotiations about terms, the Chancellor continued. Naturally, Elena agreed. Our trade terms are quite simple. All exchanges must be voluntary and mutually beneficial. No forced quotas or tribute requirements. Each party trades what they choose to trade. The ethereal's gaseous form swirled with what might have been relief. No tribute requirements? None, President Chen confirmed. The Commonwealth operates on the principle that prosperity shared freely creates more prosperity for everyone. Over the next several hours, the Council delegation toured Commonwealth facilities and learned about their new approach to galactic civilization. They saw manufacturing centers where different species contributed their unique abilities to create products none could make alone. They observed research stations where scientific breakthroughs came from combining diverse perspectives rather than following ancient traditions. Most importantly, they witnessed the voluntary nature of everything. No one was forced to work on specific projects. No species was required to provide particular resources. Instead, each member contributed what they could and received what they needed, with surpluses shared freely among all members. How do you maintain order without central authority? The Chancellor asked during a visit to the agricultural domes. We found that people generally want to contribute to something bigger than themselves, Elena explained. When they're free to choose how they contribute, they work harder and more creatively than when they're forced. But surely some regulation, is necessary, the Vorthak protested. Some species might take advantage of others. It happens occasionally, President Chen admitted. When it does, the community addresses it together. We've found that peer pressure and natural consequences work better than imposed punishments. By the end of their visit, the council delegation seemed overwhelmed by what they had seen. This wasn't the struggling colony of refugees they had expected. It was a thriving civilization that had surpassed council achievements in just 2 years. As they prepared to leave, Chancellor Vexthani asked the question Elena had been expecting. Would the council, could our species, is it possible for council members to join the Commonwealth? Elena exchanged glances with President Chen. They had discussed this possibility many times. The Commonwealth welcomes any species that shares our values of voluntary cooperation and mutual respect, Elena said carefully. However, membership would require some changes to current governmental structures. What kind of changes? The Chancellor asked. Council species would need to give their individual members the right to leave if they choose, President Chen explained. No forced labor, no tribute requirements, no military conscription. Essentially, they would need to govern by consent rather than by force. The Chancellor looked around at his delegation. These were not easy changes for civilizations that had ruled through power for millennia. I will discuss this with the full council, the Chancellor said finally. Elena stood up and extended her hand. Whatever the council decides, the Commonwealth wishes all council species peace and prosperity. We hope we can work together as partners, whether through trade agreements or potential membership. The Chancellor shook her hand, and Elena was surprised to feel the trembling in his grip. This proud being who had once threatened humanity with destruction was now seeking their help for survival. As the council delegation prepared to board their ship, the Chancellor turned back to Elena one last time. Ambassador, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, Chancellor. Do you believe we can change? That ancient civilizations like ours can learn to govern differently? Elena smiled warmly. Chancellor, 2 years ago, humanity was a junior member taking orders from the council. Look what we built when we were free to build it ourselves. Every species has potential they haven't discovered yet. The question isn't whether you can change, it's whether you want to. The council ship departed New Terra Station. Elena watched it disappear into hyperspace. The galaxy was changing, and the council would need to decide whether to change with it or be left behind by civilizations that had discovered the power of freedom. The Commonwealth continued to grow, accepting new members who chose cooperation over domination. And somewhere in the void of space, the old Galactic Council struggled to understand how walking away from power had given humanity more power than force ever could.